Okay, it is 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started tonight. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Mary Pat O'Neill with Find Your Fit through the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. I'm joined tonight by Frances Carhart, who I'll let her introduce herself in just a minute. Very excited for everybody to join us tonight. This is what I call a conversation. Frances and I are both independent college counselors. And before we get into all the details, I want to be very transparent. Neither of us are executive function experts. We're approaching this as college counselors and what we see. And just like anything with our children, because I'm assuming that most of the people here are parents, none of this is a one step and it's solved. I often go back to potty training, but it just potty training never happens overnight. At least not with my kids, it didn't. So just know that what our goal is that when you leave here tonight, that we hope that you got a few ideas that you can try and apply. Every child is different, every parent is different. And so what works for one is not necessarily going to work for the other. Just to give you a little bit about background on me, if this is your first Find Your Fit session, I'm an independent college counselor in Redmond. My children attended the Lake Washington schools. They graduated from Eastlake. My children are adults, 30 and almost 28 now. And I started working with the foundation back in 2016, I think it was. And I just believe strongly that there's a lot of unfairness in education, and especially when it comes to the college process. And this is my way of leveling the playing field and making everything as even as possible. And I always want families to know that the information that I share here, there's never a hook where I say, well, in order for you to get the final detail, you need to come and see me and pay money and all this stuff. Like I share everything that I know, and I'm very grateful for the foundation for allowing me to have this venue. Frances, so Frances and I met about a year ago. She's another local college counselor. I'll let her tell her background because she has a strong background in what we're going to be talking about tonight. But anyways, we found that we had a lot in common, and I'm very grateful to Frances for sharing her time and expertise with us tonight. So, Frances, you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Mary Pat, I'm very excited that you invited me to have this conversation with everyone tonight. I am Frances Carhart, and I've been in education for over 20 years. I started as an English teacher, a middle school English teacher, and I've taught English in middle school and high school, in public and in private schools. And then I've held kind of more administrative roles in the private school setting. So, academic dean, director of college counseling, director of student services, and all these different roles that I've had kind of inform my thinking about kids in this kind of this holistic view of supporting them, not only with academics and post, high school plans, college or whatever that is, but also kind of the mental health piece as well. And so that really shaped how I approach this. And the term adulting is something that's very important to me. I think Mary Pat and I really hit it off when we were talking about this. I'm very passionate, like Mary Pat is, about the work that I do and helping kids. And certainly finding a college is important. Finding the best fit college is important. But really, for me, what's more important is making sure they have the skills, the executive functioning or the adulting skills to be successful and manage on their own. So that's a little bit about me. I have three kids, a little bit younger than Mary Pat's. Two have graduated from college. One is a freshman in college. And I also feel pretty strongly about making sure this information is available to everybody. So I hope my biggest goal for tonight is that you leave with some very specific suggestions that you found useful that you can try and implement at your house. So thanks, Mary Pat.
You're welcome. And we will have a slide with a formal definition of executive function, but what we're working with tonight that So these are skills, and I'm a firm believer skills can be taught. Now, some people might be better at a skill than others, but skills can certainly be taught. And I define it as the mental abilities that help us manage our thoughts, our actions, and emotions to achieve goals. And that's what we are here to talk about today. And teenagers are always close to my heart. I don't know. I just love teenagers. They're the best. A couple, home little notes for tonight. So this session is being recorded. The recording will be sent to everybody who has registered. I do not send them out. Francis does not send this out. It's sent out by the foundation. They're very busy with stuff, so it usually takes about a week. It is being recorded. Uh, Francis and I have worked very hard on this, and there is a lot of good information. So we are sharing this. You will get the slide deck, which I don't always do, but the slide deck has got very good information. Francis has some additional resources. I have some additional resources. So there's going to be a whole packet that goes out, and then we will answer questions at the end. So just and again, our goal is I always feel if I can walk away with something with one or two ideas that I can apply, that to me is worthwhile. So, and that's our hope for you today. So executive function, which you're going to see it referenced as EF, just for keep it shorter. There's three different areas that it can impact their lives. One is academically, two is socially, and then also at home. So, Francis, do you want to talk a little bit about the academic impact of executive function?
Yeah, I think in my role as academic dean and helping kids with academic, this is sometimes the first place where parents and students notice there's a lack of executive functioning skills. And you will see it manifested in kids, not able to turn in their assignments or just a really long list of missing work. You can see some of the things there. What happens is the kids just aren't learning the material. There's all these different executive functioning skills that aren't working. But the challenging part is then the kids start to internalize messages that they receive that they're lazy or they can't understand something. And so, the academic area is one place where we start to see the executive functioning skills and whether or not they're strong or whether or not they need to be built up.
Yeah, because it shows up on the report card, usually,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. 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 And I guess the point I wanted to make was that yes, it usually has to do with grades, but ultimately they're not learning the material.
Right. Yeah.
But yes, the report card is definitely a place you will hear about it or see it.
Well, it's interesting. I've worked with a lot of students over the years, and uh, I do interest in skills assessments with students, and one of the categories is organizational abilities and habits and all that conventional skills. And it's interesting in talking with students because most students are very self-aware, and a lot of times these are kids like from a grade standpoint they have strong grades, A's and B's in their classes. But when you ask them, they're like, "Oh no, I procrast." I'm like, "Oh, do you wait till the?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I wait
Yeah.
till the last." And you have to think like the stress level that causes is pretty high. And this is a totally different subject, but I so wish that teachers didn't allow students to retest or retake because I think that just adds to the lack of
Yeah.
executive function.
Yes. Yeah. And I just tagging on to that, I think what the reason why I think this is valuable to talk about now, and really particular to middle school students, is that if they can build these systems now when they're in high school and it counts,
Yeah.
they'll have these systems in place. And many kids
Yes.
say to me, I don't really need a system. And then junior year hits, which is usually the most rigorous year,
Right.
and it's like, and that is not the time to be building an
Yeah.
organizational system.
Right. And the same thing is true. You and I are both in the midst of seniors submitting their college applications. I
Yeah.
don't know about you, but I've got some procrastinators there.
Yes, I definitely have those. I keep hoping to keep them accountable so we can get
Yeah,
everything turned in. But yeah.
exactly. I know, and it's tough. Okay, so another area that executive function issues can show up is with in their social life.
Mhm.
And for teens, quite frankly, social life probably means a lot more to them than their academic life.
Yeah.
And some examples of things like poor time management or organization. If there's a text that they didn't respond to, and then their
Mhm.
friends all think that they're, not interested or whatever, or another example here. With impulse control, if they're somebody who interrupts people while
Yeah.
they're talking, or if they say inappropriate things
Yeah.
socially, they can get pushed away
Mhm.
because they're not fitting in with the norm, type thing.
Right.
So, anyways, and then we've got home life.
Yeah, and in home life, you might see it where kids aren't following through with, responsibilities. They're not walking the dog like you asked them to, or putting their dishes away.
Cleaning their
Um,
bathroom.
yeah, yeah. Mary Pat and I can come up with a long
Yeah,
list
yeah, I'm sure we
if we've had these arguments. But I wanted to point out that the interesting thing about the home life is this is also where you see the academic. If a parent's concerned or frustrated with academics and a student doesn't have those skills, the tensions are not always about, they're sometimes about family responsibilities, but they can also be about the academics. And so it really, the academic and the social and the home life are very integrated. We see them, we can talk about the differences in each category, but really they're all kind of intertwined.
absolutely. And it's all important, if if the home life isn't feeling good and the academic, it just impacts
Exactly,
everything. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Okay. Why don't you walk us through the official definition?
Yeah, well, I thought that this slide was important because I talk about these skills as adulting skills a lot. But I want you to know the real definition of executive functioning is, the three mental processes that help us set and carry out goals. And they are three areas. These three different processes are working memory, cognitive flexibility, and inhibition control. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of those.
Yep. Okay. All right. So do you want me to move our faces? Would that be helpful to you?
Oh,
Or did you
no,
move? Maybe you have yours. I don't know how this all works on Zoom. Maybe you can move. Maybe you've moved yours.
mine's okay.
Okay,
Mine's
then I forget I said anything. Anyways,
okay.
talk to us about working memory.
One
I've
thing
only
I was
been
gonna,
I've
one,
only been doing these webinars for 6 years. You think I'd have Zoom figured out by now, but I guess not.
well, working memory is being able to hold on to important information. It's kind of like the brain sticky pad. And when it comes to assignments or preparing everything kids need for a school day, working memory becomes very important. I would often see it where parents are pulling their hair out because they helped a kid with an assignment. It was in their notebook. The teacher collected the assignment. Everyone knew they were turning it in. And when the kid got home, the assignment was still in their binder. And so, they weren't able to kind of follow all the steps to get it turned in. Or I have a student who is hard to remember all the things she needs to take to school. So, we talk about like, okay, well, let's get your water bottle and your backpack and your sports clothes and everything set out the night beforehand. This is not an easy task for someone who is lacking skills and working memory. And I thought I'd just say, the timelines obviously continues to grow and peak in the early 30s. And then when you get to be our age, working memory is a different issue. But the memories really, this is critical to having those executive functioning skills.
Okay. And then how about cognitive flexibility?
Yeah, so this is really the adaptability. Being able, to shift thinking and kind of what I think of as deal with the challenges that just come up with life. We all like to control it, but we know that life has a way of just happening to us. I was going to mention that when I've been working with, so I'm also in Redmond, and I have several kids from Redmond High School. And the transition from a 7 period day to a six
Yeah.
period day was interesting to talk out with many of them, because some were just like, okay, this is how it's happening, and I'm going to take advantage of it this way. And some were really stuck in, I can't believe this is happening. I'm so angry. I just can't get past, like, okay, I'm going to have to deal with this. And so there was a lot of talking about, okay, like how can you shift? How can you see positives in kind of a change? Um,
Because the change was out of their control. So
yes, yeah,
yeah,
and these usually are out
yeah,
of their control. Yes. So that's, as you can see, this is important in school, but it's also just important in
yeah,
life,
yeah.
and being able to pivot.
Okay. And then how about inhibition control?
Yeah, so this is managing the impulses, also the distractions, resisting those. You mentioned earlier about the and the social aspect, the student who blurts something out or says something inappropriate. And that is kind of what this is talking about. It also has to do with the distractions that kids have with their phones, for example,
Oh yeah.
being able to kind of concentrate a bit.
My
Um,
my husband has that while we drive and he receives a text.
Oh, okay. Oh, I was not expecting that. Yeah,
Sorry,
so he needs a lesson in inhibition control.
I'll tell him
Um,
that. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah. So, I mean, part of this is just they live in a different world,
Yeah,
and they do a lot of multitasking,
yeah.
but the ability to really manage those impulses, and maybe when a frustrating situation comes to mind, being able to pause and think before they respond.
Okay. Okay, so um obviously uh so Francis and I were talking about this before. There's a lot of
Hmm.
things that can impact executive function. And I think what started our conversation initially was prior to the pandemic, if I heard the term executive function skills, it typically had to do with a student who, maybe had a learning difference or, had an IEP and needed, but um, the remote learning really, I kept, again, we're at 5 years out now, you keep thinking, oh, that's over, but it really has had a lasting impact. And at the time, I remember the impact it had on my high school students that I was working with, but 5 years later, like I can still see it. So I think that had a huge impact. Um, and then the other big one, and we'll talk about the other ones in our opinions, is the screen time. That has
Yeah.
really, really, you hear colleges say that kids can't read books anymore. Like they have
Yeah.
to assign chapters or short stories because students cannot sit and read, which was so sad to
Mhm.
me. But you want to talk about any of these other things that
Yeah. And we do hear from colleges, as Mary Pat and I visit colleges and talk with colleges, we hear about all the skills that kids, from high school need to be successful. Yeah, I guess what I wanted to highlight on this one is that this is it's improvement. The skills are improvement over time, and there's so many factors like that. Brain development has to
Mhm.
do with each body's maturity. Genetics goes into that. If kids have experienced traumatic childhood situations, like that will affect it.
Mhm.
The sleep, I mean, sleep
Oh,
is a
sleep.
huge issue that we deal with kids wanting to overextend themselves and not sleeping very
Oh my God.
much. And
But do
yeah,
you, I get texts, I don't see them because I'm asleep and my phone is shut off, but I receive texts from students 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning,
yeah.
and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
I see their email, and then I know they're getting up for
Yeah,
school at
yeah,
6 the next
yeah,
morning. And
yeah,
I mean, that's just not good. I mean, we know what it's like when we don't get a good night's sleep, but they're doing that day in and day out.
yeah.
The
And
stress, yeah.
yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, again, every parent, we haven't gotten to the slides yet where Francis and I share all the things that we've screwed up on because
All
I
their own
certainly have.
bloopers. Yeah.
Um, but there are times when as parents, like kids will say, "Oh, everybody's, whatever.
Yeah,
No, everybody only gets 5 hours of sleep. Or I'm fine on 5 hours of sleep." But
yeah,
I again, you have to do what's right for your family. But they say 8 to 9, but I mean, if you can get those kids 7 solid hours, like, and if it means locking up their phones or whatever, I don't know. Again, my kids are adults, so I don't have to deal with that anymore. But we did. I mean, I did have to do that. And the other thing when we talk about the brain development, and again, we see this all the time. So the prefrontal cortex of the brain, while a lot of it is developed when they're younger, it is not fully developed until they are 25. I think if you're lucky, maybe closer to 30 now. I don't know. But that's just the reality. And that's why the executive function issues are there too, because this is the part of the brain that does all that stuff, and it's just not fully developed yet. So anyways,
yeah, yeah.
you
Well,
can
I
keep
was just
going.
going to say, some of these are, probably, obvious to you, but obviously, stress and mental health, neurodiversity has a whole other,
Mhm.
set of tools that are needed. You talked about the technology and distraction. And, the motivation and the relevance of what they're doing comes into play with the executive functioning as well. So it is. We're working on the skills to improve them, and we're focusing on the improvement, not whether or not they've achieved them, but we're always kind of working on, and
Yeah,
what are these factors that we can control, and what are these factors that are a little bit harder to control.
yeah, and again, it's not a one and done improvement.
Yeah.
It's figuring out. And again, we're going to go into the practical solutions in just a minute or two. But you know, and I'm a big believer in involving the student has to buy into your child has to buy into this. Like you can't force them to do these things.
Mm.
Um, and kind of asking, you know, for their input. And again, it's not a total overhaul. You got to take baby steps, and then over
Yeah.
time, hopefully, you start seeing some improvement. But
Yeah.
and as college counselors, our end goal is self-sufficiency, is for these students when they graduate from high school, whether it's going to college, going to a different program, an apprenticeship, whatever,
Grade school. Yeah.
that they can take care of themselves,
Mhm.
and not need mom and dad to take care of things for them. That's the
And we
end
think
goal.
you share that too,
Yeah,
unless you
yeah,
want them to move in with you.
yeah,
You,
right.
yeah, forever. Yeah.
Exactly. So, um, so why don't we just you and I can just alternate. Why don't you can start with the top one there, Francis. This is what
Yeah.
this
Okay.
is
So
what we
then,
mean by self-sufficient.
yeah, and so these are the things that I mean in my business, I'm helping them to think through doing this. So manage academics independently often comes into like a time management system and asking for help when they need it. If, many of the larger schools, teachers are not going to be waiting around to ask how they're doing. So it's teaching them like, how are you going to get help? Where's
Mhm,
the academic center?
mhm.
If you can't get a hold of the professor, what are you going to do?
Right. And then organization and time management skills. So the schedule, if we're looking at college, is very different from high school. If you're at a school that's on a quarter system, a student might
Mhm.
only be taking 3 classes and they have all this time, but they don't realize it's only 10 weeks and it moves very quickly. And if they don't plan their time properly, all of a sudden and I've seen that with students where they go, "Oh my God, 10 weeks is over," and they find out they didn't do very well. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think also the importance of reading the syllabus and understanding expectations. It's one thing when they're in high school, and as a parent, I used to always read the syllabus
yeah,
to understand it, and they didn't really follow it. In college, they need to know, like, if 80% of their grade is based on the final,
right.
like, you need to know that, and they need to know if they're going to miss class or leaving early to come home for the holidays.
Hmm.
How is that handled? So, really that's part of the managing academics independently, but
Hmm.
that's super important for them if they're going to be successful.
Yeah. And the same thing with can break down large projects to create a polished and professional final project because just like you were saying, in a lot of instances, the grades are might be on a midterm, they might be on a project, they might be on a final, or the project could be the final, whatever. And not waiting till the day before it's due to start it when it's 80% of your grade. And yeah, so.
Yeah. And the self-advocating I mentioned in terms of academics, but if you have trouble, if a student has trouble with a roommate,
Hmm.
they need to know how to handle that. They can't call you and ask
Right.
you to come solve it. They need to know who to go to. If they're having financial aid issues, these are important things for them to know, which is why it's important to let them start making some of these, let them lead in these conversations early, as
Right.
early as middle school.
Right. Because in middle school and high school, as parents, we're still there to
Yeah, exactly.
to catch them. It's like I'd
Yeah,
rather they mess up now. I can
yeah,
remember I always learned from older parents, friends of mine whose
yes.
kids were older, and I can remember with our daughter in middle school, she had the issue of getting out the door on time.
Oh, yes.
She was not still is
I had
not
one of those.
not a morning person. And
Yeah.
um I we and sometimes you have at least as a parent, sometimes I had to let my kids fail. And
Yeah.
it is, I don't know any parents out there, it's a very hard thing to watch, but you got to do it. And I can remember my friend saying to me, her daughter was like a senior in high school or something, and she says, "You are so smart to have her fail in middle school where
Yeah.
it's not on the permit, the part that's the college application part." And it was right, so, middle school, if that, this is for middle school and high school parents, but the earlier
Yeah.
you do it, the better. Because the stakes get kind of high if you let it start letting
Yeah,
them through the senior
exactly. And then
year.
you don't want to let go because the
No,
stakes get higher.
right,
Yes.
exactly. Okay, and just like you were just saying about self-advocacy, also the communication skills and
Yeah.
learning how, how to communicate, whether it be through email or, with with roommates. It's funny. I always tell students that, the very first day that you're living with somebody, you need to sit down and have a conversation about
Yeah.
expectations. And I always say,
Yeah.
throw your college counselor under the bus. She made me do it and said she'd be contacting me to, to verify it. But you have to do that because you hear such horror stories, and that's not right. Like a roommate doesn't have agency over over the student. Like it's equal, and they have to
Yeah.
work things out and figure it out. So,
And that communication from the start is so important. Yeah.
and then also with professors too. Sometimes students they they might need letters of recommendation to go into graduate
Yeah.
school and things like that. You have to develop those relationships. You can't go up to a professor 2 years after you've had them in class if you've never talked to them. I mean, you can, but you're going to get a lousy letter of rec, that's for sure.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The technology I think of when kids go to school, each college has their own system, their own kind of internal grading system, as well as blackboards or however the kids
Mhm.
communicate. And then also just knowing how to use email
Yeah.
for adults. That's one of the things kids often say to me, or their parents say, well, you're not going to get them to communicate via email because that's not how they communicate. I'm like, well, I'm preparing them
Yep.
to communicate with
Yeah.
adults. So they're going to start using
Yep.
email.
Yep, I just sent my seniors all an email that said, "You better be, now that you've submitted your college applications, you better be checking your emails because
Oh,
that's how they
yes,
communicate." So,
that's exactly right. That is exactly
yeah,
right.
yeah, I don't take that kids don't. It's like, yes, they do. They do.
Yeah, yeah, we have to teach them,
Yeah,
right? You
that's
talked
right.
about this is
Exactly.
everyone, these are skills that we can improve. So that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then also the importance
Oh,
of using office hours.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
imperative in college. So,
yeah.
all right. So, Francis, why don't you share again? I always say, we, as parents, we all mean well. My God, did I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I've always meant well. Have screwed up tremendously. Uh, you know, I've been a parent for almost 30 years now. I think I'm a much better parent 30 years into it than I was, the first 15. But so please, all parents know we are not pretending we're holier than thou. Because trust me,
Definitely
I
not.
have done pretty much all of these
Yeah,
things on this chart. But
yeah.
why don't you
I
go through
have.
them and
Yeah.
give examples and what you can. So
Yeah, yeah. I am sorry to say that I do still continue to make some of these errors, but I like this. When Mary Pat and I were first talking about this, I told her that when my two older boys were in high school, I read this book by Julie Lythcott Haynes, and this is where this information comes from. She was a freshman dean at Stanford, and she was so surprised that kids were brilliant. They could take all these AP and IB classes, but they could not function on campus on their own. So she has in her book a listing by ages, like what appropriate chores are and expectations. And I was still like driving to the school to drop off a lunch that, one of my sons had left. As I looked through her list, I was like, ooh, I'm doing way too many
mhm,
things. And what really caught me was she talked about the importance of wanting them to be independent. And I thought, yeah, I do. I want them to be independent. I'm afraid they're not going to get there, but I'm not helping them because I'm rescuing them. So, like, rescuing kids is definitely something that I've done. Most recently, I mean, I don't have to give you my whole laundry list of everything I haven't done well, but most recently, my freshman in college, who was a senior, we got into this place where I would see a big assignment coming up. He was a wrestler and did school leadership, and I didn't see him preparing for, the test or the papers. And so I'd be like, "How's that going?" At dinner, like, "How's that studying going?" And then the next night, how's that going? How are you doing?" And he'd be like, "You're driving me crazy. You're not
mhm,
helping me by asking me."
mhm,
And so we just had to have a conversation. I'm just like, dude, you know me, I like to be on top of things. I'm organized. I'm worried that you're not going to get to this. And he's like, okay, I hear you, but you're making it worse when you ask. So you have permission to ask me once now. You can ask me in 5 days,
mhm,
and I promise you I'll reach out if I need help. And I had to let it go. You talked
mhm,
about, the importance of letting kids fail. It's very frightening to be like, okay, I need
mhm,
to let him do this. I need to
mhm,
show him that I believe he can do this.
mhm.
And so, if that means he doesn't do well on the paper or the exam, that is part of the natural consequences that we
Mhm.
want them to go through. Okay, but
Yeah.
I don't want to totally monopolize
Oh,
this.
no.
You can certainly share your.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, oh, yeah, again, they've changed the systems. Now it's Skyward. I can't remember what
Oh,
they used back in the day, but I would go on every day. And
yeah,
that's not the right thing to do because, sometimes teachers are delayed in reporting things
yes.
and if I remember correctly, I had to basically ask my son, okay, let's come to I do need to be aware. Okay, I'm your
Mhm,
parent and I'm not just
mhm.
gonna I'm just not gonna let you go off and do whatever. And he was a good kid. It wasn't like but okay, so can we agree? And it was like something like, okay, you can check every 2 weeks or so, some whatever it was. And
Yeah.
I had to abide by that. And it was tough, but it was necessary. And you know, I I am I what I have a lot of mom sayings that I always joke I have no tattoos, but if I did, there are some and they would be quotes most likely, and one would be every choice has a consequence. And that's why and so sometimes I'd have to say to my kids, well, just let's walk this through. If this is what I expect, and I'm going to let you figure it out because you're telling me you can do this, but just so you know, this is going to be the consequence if it's not met. And I had to make sure that I followed through. Parenting tip, although I learned this when my kids were really, never threaten anything that messes up my life. So you always have to be
Yeah.
careful
Don't
about,
take away the car.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, you do have to think about like, okay, what's the natural consequence that doesn't cause me to have a horrible natural consequence? But it's very it is interesting and just again and or when it says don't jump into assuming again just well oh that sounds interesting how do you think you're going to handle that do you need advice like the our kids are smart they're smart kids and sometimes they just have to talk it through and sometimes I might say things where you think what
Yeah.
that's not but you go oh that's interesting like
Yeah.
we can't force it we can't force it
Yeah.
on them.
I was going to say that what I try to remind myself in this is that all of these things are showing our kids that we don't think they're capable.
Right.
And I don't want them to think that because I don't believe that. I
Right.
think and but if you think of it that way, I think for me that helps me kind of step back a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too, like the first one there, don't micromanage. Like, you know, we say empty the dishwasher, load the dishwasher, and we don't like how it's done, so we like that's the micromanaging. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
you know, can we do it better? Can we do it faster? Probably, but we just have to uh
Mhm.
let them do things. We
Mhm.
can show once. But and again, being patient, it's not easy being a teen. They do have a lot of pressure on
I
them.
do. It's tough.
It is. And again, mental health, sleep, and health, those are the priorities. If when in doubt, give them a hug and just say, okay, we're all
Yeah.
learning together type
Yeah,
thing.
and try not to buy into that craziness about
Oh,
all the
oh,
classes you have to take because you got to get into a certain college, right? Like
oh
help
gosh.
to
Yeah.
be the voice of reason in that situation.
I say this usually in person workshops, but seriously, parents, I am a resource in the community, and if you're hearing a lot of crazy talk and you're not sure if you should follow it or not, send me an email at findyourfit@lwsf.org and say, is this legit? Is this real? Is this how I should be thinking? Because parents just I don't think the intention is wrong, but boy, people can just work each other up, and there's so much false
Yeah,
information that gets passed around and you
oh,
know
for sure.
yeah so all right let's talk about communication strategies.
Okay. I think some of these we all know. It's just a good reminder.
Yeah.
So the first one is like focus on the effort and the small improvements, even if they seem very small. Like
Mhm.
we're trying to encourage kids to want to continue to grow and learn new skills. And so that effort is very important, focusing on that rather than the end, reaching the final spot.
Yeah. And the talk less and listen actively as somebody who does like to talk a lot, I have learned the importance of listening to my children, listening to my students, to hear what they have to say. And again, this is their journey and process.
Mhm.
And nobody feels good if, I know if somebody said to me, "Oh, Mary Pat, you're failing in this area, this, area, this area," it's like, "Oh, it looks like you're struggling a little bit."
Yeah.
Uh, how are you feeling? Are you open to some suggestions on how things could maybe get better? Like, again, we can't force, we can't change anybody but ourselves. We can offer suggestions, but none of this is forced. It can't be, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, kids can tell you that they're doing the things, but if it's not something that they're interested in, and that's why it's not when we get into the practical strategies, it's not a complete overhaul, like, oh, we're going to completely make you over. It's starting with, okay, here's a couple things. Which one do you think you could do, you'd feel good about doing, and maybe we can see the impact that it has.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say for those difficult conversations, it kind of comes back to listening. And
Hmm.
also, I think this is where the metacognition comes in, is encouraging kids to think about why they do certain things or how they feel about certain things. Like really put them in the position of kind of reflecting and they
Mhm.
start to take kind of more responsibility. And I think that fits with the listening, the staying calm. It doesn't help for if you're upset to get
Mhm.
upset when you're talking with them. And
Right.
sometimes that means taking a step back
Yep.
and having
Mhm.
that conversation when it's the right time
Right.
to have the conversation,
Mhm.
not like in the moment when you feel like you want to,
Yeah.
blow up,
Scream,
but
scream.
thinking
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think again, modeling the skills and saying, you know
Yeah.
what, we seem to be very heated here. I think we need to take a
Yeah.
break. Let's reconvene at 7 o'clock with some ice cream. And that gives you a chance to think about, are there areas where you think things could be better? And then we can talk about ideas on how to do that or something like that, you know?
Yeah. I wanted to say that, I mean, the talking less is hard for both of us because we like to talk. But, one of the things I've done with my meetings with students is I've taken the transcripts and I've asked Zoom to kind of evaluate how much time I talk and how much time they talk. And those numbers are just based on minutes, so they're not lying. So it's really forced me to think about. I really like, even though I think I'm listening, I really have to be very intentional about that. And with our own kids, I think it's even more important
Mhm.
to make sure they know that we're hearing their concerns and what they have to say.
So has that changed like the questions that you ask so that it requires the students to talk differently to you? Like,
Um, it's really mainly affected how my intentionality with being quiet. I will think of the particular student before I meet with them and how I usually interact with them. And I'll be intentional about the questions that I ask and the silence that I allow. I'm not great with silence.
no, no,
I
I
like
don't
to
think.
fill that space. And so sometimes it's just a sticky note on my laptop that says, listen.
Hmm.
But it is definitely an intentionality on my part. And I guess the questions that I ask are more open-ended.
Hmm.
So, it's very easy to ask yes or no questions. So
Sure.
I guess in that sense, I craft the questions around how am I going to elicit more from them? And then how am I going to keep myself quiet in this
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah. And to stay cool, as you said, not that
Yeah.
I get agitated, but when talking with students, but as a parent, kids know how to push our buttons.
Oh, don't they? Don't they?
Okay. So as we said earlier, we are not executive function experts, and there are certainly times where um, a professional executive function coaching might be appropriate. And Francis, do
Mhm.
you want to talk about anything here?
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to say that families and students would come to me, and I thought it was an appropriate time to seek help when they've tried different systems and it's not working. And that is like, you've tried to work with your child to get a planner to help with time management. You've tried different strategies with them and it's not working. So the grades are lower than the potential. Missing assignments are usually a huge red flag, or a sudden drop in work. As a teacher, I noticed when a student would write the essay, and if they got a bad grade and they came in to talk to me about it, like they verbalized it, they had all the content and how they verbalized it, but they were not able to reflect that and how they got it written down. There's some kind of disconnect there. Um, I think when you just see the kids are not wanting to go to school, they are avoiding school, they're avoiding situations. That's kind of the emotional and
Mhm.
behavioral signs. And the daily functioning struggles are when it's really they can't, get up and shower
Yeah,
and
get out
brush
of
their
bed.
teeth
Yeah.
and do
Yeah.
all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the duration and consistency is just thinking about like if over time they're not able to improve, these are all times to seek help. And I also
Yeah.
would like to say that if as a parent you feel like something's not right, if your gut is like, we
Mhm.
need to get help, then you should
Yeah.
definitely reach out for help.
Right.
In middle school, Your counselors are a great person to turn to who can solicit information from all the teachers to see if there are consistent patterns, or maybe there's just an issue with one classroom and maybe that's related to a subject. In the high school, it is, talking with the teachers directly, getting the kids to have that conversation.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of help out there, and I would trust your gut.
Mhm. Absolutely. And we don't want anybody to think, oh my gosh, my child couldn't get out of bed. That, like one day isn't
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
And meltdowns are normal, but
Yeah,
daily meltdowns
yeah,
could be a little
yeah.
more concerning.
The occasional missed assignment, again, that's okay.
Yeah.
Again, not in a perfect world, but what is a perfect world? So, but if you're seeing a pattern, and grades going down and things like that. So, all right. So these are the key executive function skills. We're going to be going through each of these. So, all
And
right. Oh,
I
sure.
think this, yeah, I think that this is a place where I hope you guys get some ideas.
Yeah.
Um, Mary Pat and I work with kids, and these are skills that we kind of work on with them. So, we've got some things that have been successful with students.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right, Francis. Talk to
Okay.
us about time
Okay.
management.
Okay.
This is a
Time
big one.
management.
It's a
Yeah,
big one.
time management's one of those things that is usually one of the first questions that I ask. How are you at managing your time and assignments? And they usually say, I'm fine. And maybe in the parent survey, I hear something different.
Mhm.
Um, it's really important that kids and adults have some kind of system where they can manage their time. And so for me, it's trying to find out for each student how they learn and which system is going to be best. So is it paper?
Mhm.
If they're very artistic, maybe they want a bullet journal to be tracking things. They might want something digital. I think the thing to think about is what's going to work for them,
Mhm.
to give it some time,
Mhm.
2 or 3 months. And if that doesn't work, be willing to try something else. I want the
Mhm.
kids to know that this is going to be their system and it
Mhm.
can change. I think of myself, I've been digital, I've been paper, I
Mhm.
sort of use a little bit of both. It changes over
Yeah.
time. But I want them to understand that this is a system that's going to work for them. And something that I show them is a weekly schedule with the hours blocked off of school. Like those are times you
Mhm.
can't control. And then we block out study time,
Mhm.
for a regular schedule. And then usually they're doing something extracurricular, whether it's a club or athlete or volunteering. We put those hours on the calendar. And with
Mhm.
these overlaps, you see the time
Mhm.
disappears. And so visually, they're able to start thinking about, oh, yeah, there's not a lot of time. So we talk
Right.
about the weekend time, we talk about pockets, late
Mhm.
start, early release, maybe 30, 45 minutes from when school ends before their
Right.
extracurricular starts. So thinking about that. Um, Reminders are, it's often hard for kids to remember. I mean, I can't remember things unless I have some kind of a reminder
Yeah.
system. And so
Yeah.
sometimes for kids, it's asking them how they want this. Do they want
Mhm.
something on their phone to remind them? Or if they are adding, something new into their schedule, like one of the things I ask kids to do is think about one time a week when they can look at the week ahead and kind of figure out what's going to work there. That's a time to be thinking about reminders. Do they want a sticky note? Do they want, the phone, or do they? Some of the planner systems have automatic reminders as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then last thing I'd say, we're spending a lot of time on this slide, and we won't spend as
Well,
much time on every
it's
other
an
one.
important. Time management
It is
is
important. It's
key.
very
Yeah.
important. And sometimes kids don't um, appreciate how long things take
Yeah.
them. Like I'll say when we're looking at this calendar, so I have them do this exercise where they put in how much time they think they need for studying and when are they going to fit in times for college applications and
Mhm.
essays. And I'll say, how long is it going to take you to do your math homework? You've got that every night. Oh, easy, 10 minutes. And then, the next week when I meet with them, it's just like things didn't get done like we thought. And I'll
Hmm.
start asking more questions. Well, it turns out that math homework actually takes them 30 to 45 minutes.
Right.
And so it's not right or wrong. It's teaching them to be
Right.
more aware of the time things take. Just like when we have an appointment, we have to be somewhere, we have to block out the time to
Travel time.
drive
Yeah.
there.
Hmm.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Well, it's interesting. I always enjoy talking to students and asking them how they handle things. And um, I had a student a number of years ago who struggled with procrastination and turning in his work. And I was checking in with him, and he was doing so much better. And I said, "What did you do? I'm curious. What changed?" And he said, I started doing my homework the day it was assigned instead of waiting until it was due. And he said, what happened by my doing that is it allowed me to have more time to spend on the bigger projects that were going on in the class. I've had other students who, because again, they all need, I'll say, if you're coming home from school, give yourself 30 minutes, okay? Eat
yeah,
a snack,
yeah. You need a
play a
break.
video game, TikTok, I don't care what you do, but set a timer. And then
Hmm.
when the timer goes off, you go, okay, now I gotta work. And whether
Yes,
like I'm somebody, sometimes when I'm like, oh my God, I've got all these essays I have to edit. And I go onto YouTube and I find binaural beats. And because my brain knows when that music starts going, Mary Pat,
yeah,
you gotta stop being distracted and you gotta focus. But
yeah,
and I tell kids, I'm like, get the work done, and again, break it up. You don't have to work for five
yeah.
hours straight. No one can do that, but break it up. And I guarantee, I said, if you do it right by 8 o'clock, you'll be done. You'll have dinner, you have done everything. And then, if you want to be in your room watching video, whatever it is, you got time for that. But time management is very
Yeah, I mean, the whole time thing, I think, is hard for them to get their minds wrapped around because I think they feel like they have no control over their
right.
time.
Well, and I always say,
Right.
try it for a week or two.
Yeah,
And if my idea doesn't work, okay, that's fine.
yeah.
And kids will be like, oh no, that really worked. I'm like,
Well,
yeah,
like I said, we are very lucky, Mary Pat, that when we work with kids, we have a different relationship that
yeah,
parents have.
yeah.
You know,
Because I'm not
kids
a parent.
sometimes just resist whatever a parent has to say. So we actually get to see how they are efficient
Mhm,
with their time and
mhm.
organization, and we can speak into them in ways that sometimes it's hard for parents. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk
Task
about task
initiation. Okay,
initiation.
this is like one of my favorite things. I don't know, like why everyone doesn't know this, but oftentimes kids are motivated to start, like you said, with your essays, or I gotta rake leaves in my yard. I can still keep
Yeah.
like putting that off. Um, Particularly when it comes to homework, I suggest we just start in small segments,
Mhm.
and to help you stay focused, it's like a concentrated time on, like 20 minutes on, and then 10 minutes, you get up from your seat and you go do something else. This is called the Pomodoro technique. And
Mhm.
basically, it is having a set aside time for concentration and then a time for break. It doesn't have to be 2010,
Yeah.
be
Right.
whatever a kid needs, but you set a timer. And
Right.
when the kid is doing that concentrated work and their mind wanders, which is
Yeah.
going to, you remind them and they remind themselves, like, I only got 20 minutes.
Yeah. I can do
When
anything for, yeah.
Yes, and when the timer goes off, there's no like sitting there longer to finish a
Yeah.
task. It's like, get up,
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
fresh air, get a snack, as you said,
Yeah.
like break it up, and then you've got 20 minutes to come back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that helps to break things up.
And again, this is one where you could ask your child, how long would you like? And
Yes.
initially they
Yeah.
might say 5 minutes on and 10 minutes off, but you know what? You can start with that
Yeah.
and then after a week you say, okay, that seems to be working well. Let's see if we can extend it. It reminds me, I used to run. I don't run anymore, but I taught myself to run long distances by doing 10 minutes of running and five
Yeah.
minutes of walking because
Yeah.
my brain would say, okay, I can do this for 10. But eventually I
Yes.
got up to like 8 or 10 miles and I was like, man, I couldn't do that before, but I could do it. So that's a
Yeah.
really
And
good
yeah, and
technique.
so sometimes the small segments, small intervals are good.
Yeah.
Um, Also, like when we talk about new, so I will often ask them, like, what do you want to improve upon? And it's usually a habit that they want to add. It's hard just to add a habit randomly in the week. I mean, it's hard to start and maintain a
Yeah.
new habit, but an effective way to do that is to pair it with something else you're already doing. So I mentioned earlier, it's something that I talk about with students is asking them to look ahead at the week. And so thinking about they have commitments in the afternoon when they're going to get projects done. And that time, that like kind of planning time needs to be put in the calendar. So we put it next to something they're already doing. Like for one student I was working with, they always have family dinner. So we talked about putting it either before family dinner or after family dinner,
Okay.
not in the middle
Yeah.
of a day when they're not really thinking about anything, but you kind of you pack it next to something
Mhm.
else you already do
Yeah.
regularly.
Yeah.
And then and last thing I'd mention here is that honestly, sometimes they're difficult conversations that I have to have with my students that not everything's going to be fun for you.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes I get them to think about you don't always understand the value of something in the moment. Geometry was not a class I particularly enjoyed, and I saw no relevance until my husband at the time and I were replacing the molding, and there
Yeah.
were no 90 degrees of walls in the house. It was all different angles.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you just never know. Like, if it's an English class and they see no use of it, you never know when they're going to need it, and help
Yeah.
them to understand that not everything's fun and not
Right.
everything's going to be what they want to do.
And sometimes even if you pair that not so fun thing that they have to do with something fun
Yeah,
too, you know?
actually, that's perfect. That's
Yeah.
a great advice. Yes.
Yeah.
I like
Okay.
the ice cream,
Yeah.
meeting it, 8,
Yeah.
8 p.m. to have ice cream and talk it out.
Okay, so let's talk about goal setting.
Okay, goal setting. Again, this is a place where you should ask
Yeah.
students to come up with their goals. It doesn't have to be, what do you want your goals to be for the next year? With my seniors, I'll often say, what do you want your goal between now and between September and December? What do you want those goals to be? And have them identify them. They don't have to be very many. Oftentimes, when I'm talking with younger kids, I'll say, what are some academic goals you might want to think about? And they're like, well, I want to get better grades. And so we teach them about, well, that's not really measurable. I mean, we can say that you might have better grades, but what if you worked really hard and the grades don't show it? We need to think about SMART goals. So making them specific and measurable. So it might be, you know what, I am going to spend an hour studying history
Hmm.
um, during the week, and I'm going to go to office hours once a week. Like really getting to think about like how do they want to improve. I do this a lot with them. I don't know if you do this, Mary Pat, but often like, okay, like what goals do you have for the summer?
Hmm.
And they don't have to be academic.
Right.
They can
Right.
be family things. I will ask my seniors to think about what are your goals for
Yeah.
going off to this new
Yeah.
school?
Yeah.
Just a good practice.
Yeah. And again, making them specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound.
Yes.
So all right. How about
Okay.
the
Flex.
flexible thinking, which was the impulse control, right? That's what
Yes, yes, yeah. And I already mentioned Julie Lifecott-Hames, so I
yeah.
won't go into her a lot, but she has this book. You can get lots of good ideas there. Two ideas here. One is the growth mindset. So not that black and white thinking, but understanding that you can improve over time. For example, sometimes kids come and they say, I'm terrible at math.
Hmm.
Messages that they've received and just kind of those overall messages they tell themselves. And like that's to have a growth mindset. You could say something like, this is a little more challenging for me, but I can work at this and I can get it. It might take me a little bit longer, but I can get to it.
Hmm.
And, the whole schedule thing, I'm not really thrilled about the schedule going from 7 classes to 6 classes, but you know what? I'm going to see if I can learn something from this. So the
Hmm.
flexible thinking, super important just for life. And we talked about you know difficult things that are not always
Yeah.
fun. A conversation I have often with students has to do with adults they think are difficult,
Hmm.
and it's usually a coach or it's a teacher.
Or a teacher,
And
right?
yeah, yeah, and I'm not saying they're not difficult, but the conversation I have with a student is, well, how are you going to manage this?
Yeah.
Because difficult people, I'm sorry to tell you, don't go away.
No, they don't.
So, what can you learn from them? How can you try to interact with them in ways that would be more positive for them? I think these conversations, they're oftentimes open-ended questions. Like, oh, how could you think about ways that might be positive interactions for the teacher? Or what do you think the teacher would think
Right.
about,
Yeah.
positive
Trying to,
ways to interact with them, right? Thinking
right.
outside the box.
Yeah. Well, I laughed at the black and white because teenagers think in terms of black and white.
Yeah, yeah.
Black, white. And I always joke, the time you get to my age, it's like, no, no, life is
Everything's
gray. Everything's gray.
everything's
Everything's
great.
great. But it's interesting about because the growth mindset is so important, and I see it. I don't know if you see this too, but especially in the essay process with students, because I
Yeah.
always tell students, my job is to provide feedback and it's not personal, but my job is to help you improve your essay. And some students, and I go, this, I know I'm being really hard on you, and I have to be because I know you've got this in you.
Mhm.
And some kids, even though it's like and to see the change, I'm always like, you're going to be amazed at the difference in your essay by
Yeah.
the time we're done. And then other kids, it, they they're like, I never want to see you again. And they will literally just disappear. And I'm like, oh, and I feel bad because the growth mindset is so important. And it's something
Yeah.
as an adult, we know we constantly receive feedback. And I get feedback and I'll reflect. And first, you might go, oh, I don't love it, but is it valid? Yes, it is. And then you learn
Yeah.
from it. And again, and something I learned, this is a little more of a parenting thing, but I learned this when my children were very young. A lot of times as adults, we look like kids don't realize that we have problems too because
Shocker.
because we solve them in our heads.
Uh,
And so I started like when my kids, I would be like, oh, this friend did this and it hurt my feeling. Like I would talk aloud my process that I was going through and how I made decisions and like just so that they understood and they could hear it. And so sometimes parents sharing with their children, like, yeah, I was a student too, and this is, you know, because I think sometimes teens think we don't understand that we weren't ever that age, that we didn't make mistakes, and quite frankly, I always believe we learn the most when we make mistakes. When everything goes super easily, we don't really learn a whole lot. And so just for kids to understand, like these aren't punishments. This is how we learn and grow, and things, don't always
that's
go.
how, yeah. Yeah. If you're always in the same routine, you never grow. I've been very lucky. The schools I've worked at, growth mindset is something that as a faculty,
Hmm.
we really tried to make sure everyone understood and we sent the right messages.
Hmm.
I think sometimes when kids receive those messages at school, it's hard. But as a parent, how you respond, how you encourage them
Hmm.
in their thinking can be profound. And
Hmm.
so it's just the small things that we say, or even our own examples that show them that growth, like failure, is the best way to grow.
Hmm.
I don't like hearing that in the middle of my failures, but I
Right.
know looking back over my life, those are the moments when I've grown the most.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, how about impulse control?
Okay. How are we doing for time? Do I need to kind of speed
Uh,
it up a little bit?
no, we're doing fine.
Okay. So, a couple thoughts here. First of all, I love the Calm and Headspace apps.
Hmm.
There's good stuff in there about breathing, about kind of meditating, and just overall being able to kind of manage, impulses. But when kids, I think it's harder for students because their emotions are just heightened and they're going through puberty. I think that encouraging them, teaching them how to step away,
Hmm.
take a break when they're upset, this is usually modeled
Yes,
more
thank you.
than taught, right? So they
Yeah.
see how we handle this. And so sometimes for kids, having like stop, think, do, like something that's very, catchy that you can say to them that you practice is something that they can integrate
Mhm.
into their routine. Stop, you're upset about something. stop, just remove yourself from the situation or just stop and then think, bring down the emotions, breathe, think, and then you can act.
Yeah,
And so it's yeah, super valuable.
excellent. And then self-monitoring and reflection.
Yeah, this gets back to that, metacognition, getting kids and adults to think about what worked, where do they improve? It's that self-reflection
Yeah.
piece. And I often think these are good conversations to have in the car when
Mhm.
when your child are looking
Yeah.
straight ahead.
Yeah.
It's just like it's big questions. You can ask these at the dinner table, and everyone in the family could answer, the adults could answer as well. Again, modeling is the best way to teach kids these skills. And journaling is a great way to do the self-reflection. If your student doesn't really like to verbalize that, or maybe they feel embarrassed verbalizing it, journaling is a great way. It helps to manage stress and anxiety. For me, it gives me clarity. A lot of times
Mhm.
when I can't figure out something,
Yep.
I write over time and I'll get clarity. But this reflection is part of the maturity of growing up and thinking, what did I learn from that situation?
Yeah.
Particularly when it gets down to these failures, it
Yeah.
hurts, it stings. And
Yeah.
I really don't want to talk about it in the moment, but over time, if you can teach kids to kind of step back and think, okay, it didn't go well with that teacher last year. How might we do things
Mhm.
differently this
Yeah.
next year? How do you want to handle situations
Yeah.
differently?
Yeah. And with the, I like on the slide where you focus initially on the positive part because there's
Hmm,
always going to be areas that still need improvement, but
of course, yeah.
focus on what worked well, how, how did they improve? What did you notice? And again, it can just be the most minute things like, oh, okay.
Yes. But you are right, Mary Pat. I think focusing on the improvement is really important because we can easily get into the critical stage where we're focused on what didn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. When I first meet with families, I like the parents to tell me what they see as their child's strengths
Oh, I asked that
uh,
question too. I
um
love that. Yeah.
and it's interesting. And most parents do a marvelous job. But every once in a while, I get a parent who says, "Well, let me tell you what's wrong with them." And I
Yeah.
always have to say, "Oh, I'm pretty sure they already know." Like that's probably right because kids never hear what they do right. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just as parents we're so busy we don't always focus on that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I
um,
always hope those surveys, when I ask that question, I always hope that that gives parents a moment to step back and think, wow, there's so many positives with
yeah,
my
so
child.
many.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard as a parent. Okay. Uh, Communication, things you can be doing now. Um, thanking teachers, thanking adults in their lives is an important thing to do to show
Mhm.
appreciation. Um, I think it's an important thing to do, but it's also your students will be asking their teachers for letters of recommendation.
Yes. Yes.
And so, like, show appreciation for what they do, show interest in their
Yeah.
lives. Like, I
They're
think it's just
human.
a valuable thing to do.
I
But
always
yeah,
tell
they're human beings. Yeah,
I
yeah,
tell I tell students because we talk about letters of rec, and you and I both know that's probably one of the least favorite parts for students is because it's out of
it
their
is.
control. They have to ask for them and all this stuff.
Asking is hard. It's
Oh,
like,
asking for them
please,
and then
yeah.
following up and
Oh, yeah,
all
yeah,
this
yeah.
stuff. But anyways, the number of students who, when I say, do you talk to your teachers? And so many are like, no, like, and I'm
Yeah,
like, whereas I was, I love teachers, so I was always the suck up, and I wanted to be friends with all my teachers,
yeah,
But I always just say, get in the like, start this in middle school. Again, you don't have to be chummy with them. You don't have to
yeah,
talk to all of them, but especially if it's something interesting, or if you say, oh,
yes,
I saw what you were talking about on TV, or what. They're
yeah.
human beings, and teachers are wonderful. So, anyways, but
Yeah, I agree. I agree too. If you can help your students to use email, to check their email, I mean, not only is this something they were going to use as an adult, but in the college process, they
Mhm.
are going to get emails. And as Mary
Mhm.
Pat mentions, one of the hardest things is when a student does all the work of turning in the application, but they're not checking their email about a missing
And then they
document.
miss and or they I had a student once who was direct admitted into a program,
Mhm.
but because he didn't read his email or go into his portal, I don't know what the detail was, but he missed something
Yeah.
and he missed the deadline. And we try, I tried when he found out, and then I tried to do what I could to help, but they're like, yep, sorry, you
Yeah,
you lost your spot. And so, and that's again, a lot of this stuff to an adult it might seem, well, that's common sense or whatever, but it's not to our kids. We
yeah,
have to teach them. We have
yeah.
to teach them.
Yeah, and I would say in our business, like, the talking to the teachers, I might spend an hour brainstorming with the kid about how they're going to connect with this teacher,
Hmm.
when they're going to raise their hand in class. And the same with the email.
Hmm.
It's like over time, kids don't respond to email, right? So then
Hmm.
we try a different avenue and then we teach them the importance of email. And so one of the beauties of our work, and is particularly important to me, is trying to teach them these skills. All right,
Hmm.
the role play conversations. I think that's I do role play with
Hmm.
kids a lot just to
Hmm.
get them think about how that might turn out.
Yep.
Writing down the questions is super valuable. They have to articulate what it is they want to ask and then think through how that might go. The role
Hmm.
play just also diminishes that anxiety
Yeah.
around the conversation. I mean, there's still going to be some anxiety. I don't want to say it's
Yeah.
anyway, but they've actually talked through this. And if they can do it with a parent or an adult, that's even usually more
Yeah.
difficult than doing it with the person that they're concerned about. And
Um, oh, I was just going to say, my daughter's now 30, so this was a long time ago, but I used to have to role play with her because you didn't have texting at this
yeah,
point.
yeah,
To how to pick up the phone and invite somebody to come over,
yeah,
like it was really hard for her. And so we
yeah,
would role play.
yeah. Yeah, it can be very effective. And then as a previous middle school teacher, um, this is the time to be teaching kids to have those conversations. Um, Again, as Mary Pat said earlier, if they can start these now and fail in middle school, then you'll kind of help build up these skills so that when they get to high school, when grades matter, when they get to college, where it really matters, they'll have those skills. And so,
Yeah.
like, as a middle school teacher, I would often have a parent reach out to me about a question or a concern, and I would say, I'd really like to talk to your child first. Like, have them come to talk to me. And when they come to talk to me, they realize I'm actually not the evil person they thought
Right.
I was.
Yeah,
I'm actually people.
exactly. Well, and the other thing, these skills don't miraculously happen upon high school graduation.
That's right.
So okay, so we're almost done here, and then we'll go into questions.
Yeah, and this just ties to at the
Yeah,
beginning we talked about we
yeah.
see executive functioning
And
and
And,
academics
and
and so
there are some good like apps and things like that. I'll include those in the resources.
yeah, and I'll include my resources as well. But I was just the thing I thought about here was that each kid's different. I have
Yeah,
a senior who color codes
yeah,
everything. I
right,
love different color sticky pads,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so yeah, I
yeah.
think we
And
talked
again,
about that.
it's whatever works for people.
Yes, yes,
And
yeah,
then from the social, same thing, role playing, emotional that the stop, think, do,
yes,
perspective. Again, different perspectives. Like, oh, so many so many I don't know what I read today, but it made me laugh. And I've learned this a long time ago, but kids, even adults will think this, being like, oh, people are mad at me, blah blah blah. It's like, no, no,
yeah.
they're not thinking about you. I guarantee
They're not thinking
they're
about
not
you.
thinking about you. Okay, that's the problem right there. You're thinking that they're thinking about you. but
That's
but
true.
just again giving them that perspective, and
Yeah,
then reinforcing positive, oh, you were so polite there. Oh, I liked how
yeah.
you talked to that adult, or you weren't I know that was hard for you, but you raised your hand and asked a question, whatever.
They're
So
all great examples. Yeah.
yeah. And then in the home life, and you know, I know, especially for mothers, sometimes it can be easier for us to do things, but truly teaching our children
Mm,
how to do things, how to cook, how to do their
yeah.
laundry, how to clean their bed. I can't remember how old our kids always started. I always made them start doing their laundry in fifth grade in the summer. I would do it during the school year, but in the summer they started then, and sometimes they would fail and stuff. And then they had other chores, cleaning their bathrooms and cleaning their bedrooms and changing the sheet, whatever. And a friend of mine told me that she was with my son and some other boys, and the boy she was just listening, and the boys were having a conversation about what their responsibilities were at home. And the ones who had the most, they were kind of bragging to the other kids that, like, and whereas the kid who didn't have any or had very little, she said, I could tell he felt like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, so even though they might complain, it teaches them a lot. And again, it's not going to be perfect. If they end up throwing their red sweatshirt in with their white jeans or whatever, well, that's a natural
Yeah.
consequence, and you don't have to buy them new ones. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I like what you said about, some of those positive things you can say as a parent. I think ultimately what's most important is that your kids know that you love them
yeah.
and you accept them the
Hmm.
way they are. We are all growing and improving. No one's perfect.
And we're so different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you know, highlighting specific things that you appreciate them, areas where they improve, even if it's small, or those are really valuable, even though you may not see that they appreciate it.
And I will tell you, like, you know, I can remember my kids being in high school and the fight, and oh, I love this child more than that child, and this child, sneering at me. And now it's like I look at them, and I just think, wow, look at these wonderful human beings, these wonderful adults, and
Yeah.
it, and it's not easy. I mean, especially sometimes my son, who was probably the one I was the closest with, and then he became the most challenging because teenagers aren't
Yeah.
easy. But
Yes. They're not.
I think about, you got to stay steady.
Yeah.
They come back to you.
Yeah, they do. It works out.
It
And
does.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
anyways,
In the
okay.
moment, we all appreciate the pain you're going through. Just
Yeah.
that
Trust
I've been through a lot of it. Yeah.
Trust me. The stories I could tell if we had
Yeah.
more time. And as the slide says, focus on progress, not perfection. Don't come if your friend is telling you about how perfect their kid is, I guarantee you they're probably not.
Yeah.
They're just probably trying to make themselves feel better. Everybody deals with things.
That's
We
true.
all we all have we all have our own issues and stuff like that. Again, it's that unconditional love because that
Mhm.
is what they need. They just
Yeah.
need to know that
Yeah.
there are those people who just love them no matter what.
Mhm.
Okay, we're going to go into questions. As just a repeat, if you missed the very beginning, this is being recorded. The recording, the slideshow, and resources will be sent out to everybody who registered. As I said, I don't send this out. Francis doesn't send this out. It's sent out by the foundation, so it's usually about within a week that it'll come out. And anyways, we just thank everybody and the Find Your
Yeah.
Fit email that's on there. Again, I am a resource in the community. I am always happy to answer any questions that families have about high school, life after high school. The next Find Your Fit webinar is going to be in January the 13th. It's going to be how to pick your classes in high school. And I'll be joined by the wonderful Taylor Rule, who's a school counselor at Juanita. So let us see what questions we have
Yeah.
here.
I also just, as she's looking for questions, I want to thank you guys for coming. I know life is super busy when you have kids at home and especially midweek. So thanks for jumping on the call with us.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't know if we have any questions.
Good. We answered all the
I
questions.
guess we did, but everybody seemed to appreciate it. So,
Oh, that's
um,
good.
yeah, let's see. I'll just make sure that there's no questions. Okay. Well, Francis, I very much thank you for your time. This was
Oh,
wonderful.
yeah.
I enjoyed the opportunity to have a conversation with you. And
Yeah, it's so
thank you,
fun. Thank you for
everybody,
inviting me.
for joining us. And keep doing what you're doing with your kiddos because they need you. So
Yeah.
we're all a work in progress. So anyways, someone, oh wait, we have a question here.
Oh,
My current has no, um, okay. So this parent, they have a ninth grader who does not use a planner. Grades are great, but the parent knows things are only going to get tougher. How can we
yeah.
explore different tools and get her on board before she's overwhelmed?
Hmm. I think that's a great question. And this is the time to start talking about getting a planner. And sometimes it can be you showing them. I think sometimes parents showing kids how they manage all their different tasks is a way to kind of get them thinking about it. But I think you want to approach this with things are going to get busier for you.
Mhm.
And we don't want to be fixing the airplane midair. We
Hmm.
want you to find a system that's going to work and we can refine it. And you get to decide, if you want to go get color pens and pencils and sticky notes and a bullet journal, you can do that. Or if you want to look into a paper planner, I think you just make it kind of fun that they're part of this, and this is giving them skills so that they will be able to manage and
Yeah.
organize going forward. I don't know
Because
what you
I
think
can
about
tell you that ninth grade is a big transition from middle
that. It
school, and
is.
it only gets tougher. So kudos to her. And again, I'd say you don't want her to feel like you think she's going to fail, type thing. But it's just like, I love you, and I know because I talked to other parents, this is going to get harder. And again, there's one of the resources we're going to send. There's a lot of apps that are out there, and your child might be more into that. Like, you know, it's 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 what it's called guided choices. I always think about I always use the thing about when my kids were toddlers and stuff. Um, but like if you'd say, do you want to wear the green coat or the red coat today? And it's like they're wearing a coat. They're not leaving without the coat. But when like you let them pick, so like okay, these are different options. Like and it could be oh, second semester, our goal, we would like you, and you can explain why, because we love you and we just want to get things set up so that it's a regular habit for you. Second semester starting, let's start it there. And then and then you can evaluate it at the end of third quarter. Is this helpful? And if it's, and again, it I think encouraging, but at the end of the day, they have to decide. But I would at least have them try and say, and maybe ask them why are you so against it too? I don't know.
Mm.
What do you think, Francis?
Yeah, I think I was just rereading her question. Sarah, it's interesting because there are some kids, and I didn't get this from your question, but there's some kids who are resistant to it, to change. And there's some kids, if you could present it in kind of a fun and exciting way, they get excited. So my answer was like present it in kind of this fun and exciting way. I think for the kid who maybe is not as excited, it can be tied back to, okay, well, I'm not going to step in and help you with any of this for the next couple of weeks. Let's see how you do managing it. And then oftentimes you'll see where those weaknesses are. Also for my boys, I might actually, if they had other dads that I knew or Boy Scouts or wrestling or whatever, I'd just be like, can you tell my son like what
Yeah.
you do to manage your time, like someone who they would admire.
Hmm.
And as you know, we can tell kids like things that are so important, and then somebody else tells them the same thing and they think they're brilliant. So
Right.
turn to people around you in your circle who they value and trust and
Or
respect.
if there's a student maybe that your daughter admires, an older
Yeah.
student, who can attest to the fact that wow, yeah, it gets much harder once you get into these AP classes or whatever.
Mhm.
And again, make sure that the student uses a planner, but then have them share. Someone asked about specific apps, and again, this will be in the resources, but
Yeah, let's send out the
some of
resources.
the
Yeah.
ones that I have written down, there's one called My Homework, there's one called Trello, there's one called Todoist, there's
Oh, yeah.
and not in I think My Study Life. Anyways, it'll be in the resources that I send. But and again, it's a matter of again the guided choice. Which one of these would do you think we're in? Let them try them out and
Yeah.
see
And
how.
the question I often ask is like, if you're in class and the teacher tells you the assignment in the last 5 minutes, which often happens,
Right.
do you want it on your phone, or are you gonna have
Yeah.
you can have it on paper? Like get them to think about like, okay, if this is what you like, is this really gonna work for your classes and situations?
I find sometimes I work with students who have learning differences like ADHD, and again,
Hmm.
we talk about organization and procrastination, and I will almost always ask, do you use a planner? And a lot of times the students go, it's up here.
Yeah.
And I always say, yeah, and I can tell, because I can try
So
to remember
true.
things too, but So whenever if your kid goes, it's up here, I guarantee they're having
That's trouble.
yeah, I mean it's just the reality of it, you know.
Yeah, it is.
Again, you can keep it up here, but let's put it someplace else too, just to back it up. And I don't know because I don't have access to Skyward, which a lot of the Lake Washington schools are on. I don't know if they have a planner in there, maybe built into the system. I have no idea because I don't have
Well,
access to it.
I can chime in there. I don't know about Skyward, but at the schools where I worked at, a lot of teachers have to put assignments in,
Mhm.
and so kids can see upcoming what's on the schedule. I'm actually not a big fan of that because kids then become dependent on someone telling them what's due, and when they get to college, they just don't have that. So I know a lot of parents and students like that because they like to know kind of what's coming up. But I always say to them, keep in mind, next year you're in college, you're not going to have any of that. So how are we going to transition you so you get in the habit of tracking down what's due and putting it on your own calendar?
Mhm. Yeah. So, there's as with all things, there's not a one size fits all answer to any of this.
There's
And you do
it
know
depends.
it
It depends.
depends. It depends, I know. And you know your child best. But again,
Yes.
they're getting to the age where involving them in the conversation instead of coming down with the hammer, oh, I listened to this webinar and these women said you must do
Yeah.
this. That's not very effective, unfortunately. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, I hope everybody has a great night. Thank you for the questions. Francis,
Yeah.
great to
Thank
talk to
you.
you. And we'll see everybody soon. Bye.
Bye.